What's up everyone, this is Luke, and if you have clicked onto this video then you're probably wondering the same thing that I am. Am I really recording a video on KSI and Logan Paul? Well, yeah, I am. The first KSI fight was the biggest amateur fight of all time. It got tens of millions of views, and this fight is expected to be even bigger. Even though it's on pay-per-view, which means you're gonna have to pay for it if you wanna watch it here on the YouTube platform, I think it's gonna be the biggest amateur fight of all time. It's gonna make both men a lot of money. Well, a lot more money than they have already. This is the first of two fights, so there's this one happening in August of 2018, and they're going to have another fight in 2019 as well. Obviously, this video is focused on the first of those fights. The fact that there's a second fight already agreed and already signed in the contract has its own effects on this fight and its potential outcome. I'll be covering that a little later on. If you're new to the channel, you're probably wondering why you should trust my opinion. Well, I'm a professional gambler. I make my money betting on sports, in the casino world as well, exploiting bonuses, and that's something that I've taught on this channel for a long time now and on the website as well. Needless to say, I know a thing or two about betting. Secondly, I'm a big boxing fan. I love boxing. I've watched a lot of fights in my life. I've also tweeted out a couple of betting tips in the past for boxing fights. Only the two, but they were both underdogs and they both won. You could be sat there thinking, wouldn't a professional fighter be better to offer their opinion rather than a professional gambler? Well, you could be right there. Fighters are going to have a lot of fight experience, obviously, but they're probably going to have their own biases. They're probably not going to be as good as someone like me at taking a back seat, looking with an objective view at the situation, looking at the stats, the information we have at hand, and how the market is reacting to that and looking to exploit the market based on the biases that I can find. I also want to say that I did watch another video, Professional Fighters Predict the Outcome of KSI and Logan Paul, and it is one of the worst videos I've ever seen. Genuinely just doing it for the views. And I'm definitely not just doing this for the views. And most of the fighters didn't even know who the two people were. They didn't know anything about them. They hadn't watched any of their footage. All they knew was that Logan Paul was a former wrestler and KSI was a former gamer. Obviously, you're going to side with Logan Paul based on his wrestling background if that's all the information you have. You don't need to be a professional fighter to say that based on that information at hand. I thought I'd be much better suited to offer an actual opinion on the way this fight is likely to go based on their fight styles, their attributes, their physical qualities and more. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to look at the two fighters themselves. I'm then going to talk about the outcome of the fight that I see happening, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about their brothers fighting, Deji against Jake Paul as well, although I'll be sticking to KSI against Logan Paul for the main focus of this video. Let's get stuck in and look at the two fighters now. Firstly, let's start with KSI. He's the guy that's already had an actual YouTube boxing match and won in a big fight against Joe Weller.
Landing the jab early. Right hook by JJ. Another jab by JJ. Joe not answering. Joe hasn't thrown a punch yet. The jab of JJ is a nightmare to deal with.
The nightmare! Hey! KSI!
The fact that he's already had a fight gives him a potential major advantage with the fact that he's been there and done it. He knows what it's like to deal with that pressure and still come out victorious in front of a lot of people where a lot is on the line. You know, we've seen with Joe Weller, his career has sort of taken a downturn since the fight. You could say that KSI ruined his reputation by losing, and this could happen again. The loser of this fight that's coming up could see their reputation massively tarnished. They're going to be embarrassed. KSI has had this pressure and dealt with it already, and that could give him an edge in the mental game. We saw the training videos that happened around that fight, and we're now seeing a lot more training videos and sparring footage leading up to the Logan Paul fight. So we have a decent amount of footage to go from in order to judge his qualities as a boxer. And he does seem to have some good movement. He can certainly hit with power. He has some decent timing. We've also seen a lot of footage from KSI. Obviously, he's already had that fight that we've all seen and know he didn't look the best, but he was brand new to boxing at the time of that fight. And he's trained with some good fighters as well, and the fighters tend to have some good feedback about him. Now, obviously, he's only going to share the positive stuff, the stuff that's going to make him look good, and the stuff that's also going to perhaps put fear into Logan Paul if he sees it. But if you know the world of boxing, you can tell that he sort of knows what he's doing, especially for someone so new to the sport. And yes, Logan Paul's new as well, but we'll get to him a little later on. We've also seen KSI sparring with Bugsy Malone. I think this is very important because Bugsy Malone is taller and has more muscle than KSI does. This is something that Logan Paul also has an advantage over him with. So he's picking his opponents wisely in sparring, and KSI doesn't look too bad in that sparring at all. And Bugsy Malone would definitely have not gone easy on him. He'd have wanted to win that fight, hands down. In the sparring footage that we have seen, KSI looks fairly decent. He starts with a defensive approach, very cagey. He likes to suss his opponent out, and then once he knows that he's got a feel for them, or he thinks that he has sussed the opponent out, he'll then start to pick the tempo up and get a bit more involved and throw some more punches. But he does like to start off cagey and work the jab. This is something that's very important and could help him to win the fight. Let's move on to Logan now, and as we quickly covered there, he has the reach advantage, he has a height advantage. These are some things that are obviously very important in boxing, but he also has a muscle advantage. He has more muscle mass than KSI does, and this means he's probably going to be stronger, he's probably going to be able to hit with more power, but when you have more muscle, you also have less stamina. Muscle drains the oxygen more than fat does, and this means that he could tire quickly compared to KSI. So he's going to be hitting with more power, but he's going to tire more quickly. He also has a wrestling background, so he's had a lot of wrestling fights in his past. Whilst he's not had a boxing match like KSI has in front of a lot of people, he has dealt with the pressure of having a fight with someone in a high pressure scenario, although admittedly nowhere near as high pressure as this one with the whole world of YouTube watching. We've seen very little of Logan actually training, sparring, and we don't know if this is because he's not very good or because he's keeping his cards close to his chest. If I was preparing for a fight like this, and look at me, I've never had a fight in my life, you can probably tell, I would probably be looking to do the latter and keep my cards close to my chest, because if my opponent was releasing a lot of footage, I would be looking to analyse it and see his weaknesses. So perhaps this is what Logan Paul is doing and making sure KSI doesn't have enough to go off in order to judge his game plan or judge his style. But what we have seen of Logan Paul's sparring, he looks quite quick, he looks to have good movement, he also seems to throw a lot of punches. This might not be a good thing. It's the type of thing that looks very good on Instagram in a quick 20-second clip, makes you look like a very good fighter, but throwing a lot of punches can tire you out. And just because you throw a lot, it doesn't mean that you hit a lot. He does knock the guy down in sparring, which is footage that he almost certainly leaked himself to the media in order to get it out there, make him look good. A lot of people have commented that that sparring footage or the sparring knockdown was perhaps fake. I think, going on the balance of probability, I'm going to say that it was a real knockdown, but he certainly doesn't hit him with his full force. The guy does go down fairly easily, and it could just be a case that he wasn't well balanced. So let's move on now to talking about the fight itself and how I see it going. Well, as I said earlier on, this is the first of 2 fights, and that could have an impact on the way this fight pans out. In the face-to-face interview with Johnny Nelson, we've already seen that both were talking about wanting to put on a show.
I want to give the fans a show. I'm a showman.
Both fighters were saying they weren't going to go for an early knockout, and whilst they could be trying to trick their opponent, they could be trying to confuse them and make them think that they're not going to go for an early knockout and then go for it, obviously, and put some pressure on early. I don't see this happening. Look, these guys are boxers probably third, whereas they are entertainers first and money makers second, and they're 2 very important factors when you think that there's a second fight. They want to make sure that people are entertained in this first fight, and they want to make sure that they're entertained enough to not only buy it, get their friends to buy it as well, but they want to make sure that they're entertained enough to buy the second fight. They're going to want some drama, they're going to want to make sure they got their value for money in order to buy a second fight. These people are going to be very rich from this first fight. They're going to be a hell of a lot richer if there's 2. There's a lot of money in the world of boxing. Not just the fact that it's a pay-per-view fight, but also with sponsorship. There's a lot of money in sponsorship. So there's the fact that this second fight is on the minds of the boxers. They're going to want to make sure that it goes into the later rounds. Now, this obviously doesn't mean that it's definitely going to go to a points decision. There could be a knockout in those later rounds, but I don't see there being an early knockout. If there is, it would be very, very surprising indeed. It just doesn't make sense from an entertainment perspective, a money perspective, but it also doesn't make sense from a boxing perspective. If one of them goes in trying to get that early knockout straight away, they become very susceptible to being hit on the counter. And if they get knocked out themselves in the first round, they're going to be embarrassed forever. And look, they say all publicity is good publicity. The fact that they got knocked out in the first round, they're going to be all over the news, all over the internet. That's not going to be good for them when they have genuine rivalry. They're not going to want to put up with the embarrassment of that happening. So I don't see the early knockout happening at all. Both fighters have also talked about wanting to get a measure of their opponent early on. And this is something that I've already commented on with KSI's fighting style. He likes to be very defensive and cagey to start off with. And I see Logan Paul being exactly the same. Because Logan is obviously going to know that KSI fights like this, he's going to want to do the same thing. He's going to want to get a feel for him. He's not going to want to dive in too early and get caught. I see KSI using that jab, and I see Logan Paul trying to do the same thing and use his reach advantage. Who's going to control the centre of the ring? I don't know at this time. I would say that it's probably going to be Logan Paul early on, but we'll see what happens later on in the fight. What do I see for the actual outcome and what will I be putting my money on? Well, what I put my money on does very much depend on the odds and the value of those odds that I have. That's something I try and teach on this channel. It's not just about picking a winner or picking a winning bet. It's about picking a winning bet at the right price. That's how you have long-term success. But if I get the right price, I would probably be putting my money on KSI to win on points. I think his cardio advantage is massive. I think he's going to massively outlast Logan Paul in the stamina department. He's been training for twice as long. He's been training fitness. We know that he's done a lot of running, a lot of cardio work, and he knows full well the importance of having good cardiovascular fitness, whereas Logan Paul, whilst he might have been training cardio now since the fight was rumoured, since the fight was announced, he has a lot of muscle on him, and you can't just lose that muscle. The muscle that KSI had was mostly built up in preparation for the fight, whereas Logan's actually going to want to lose some of his muscle mass in order to be more fit and have more stamina if the fight goes into the later rounds. However, whilst I think KSI winning on points is the most likely outcome for this fight, I don't think it's impossible there's a knockout. I think if one of the fighters gets knocked out cold, it's likely to be KSI. I think Logan Paul could land a big punch and it knocks KSI out. I don't think KSI knocks out Logan Paul, but I do think he could have a technical knockout. This is where the fight gets stopped early. So if KSI is putting a lot of pressure on, Logan's a bit dazed, can't put up a fight anymore, and the referee stops it, that is a technical knockout. And I think that's the more likely outcome. That's the same thing that happened to Joe Weller. The fight got stopped, it was a technical knockout from KSI, and not someone being knocked out cold. I think that if either boxer gets knocked out or, you know, a TKO, it's going to happen from the third round onwards and probably more to happen later in the fight. But I do think a points decision makes the most sense with the fact that both boxers will not want to get knocked out and the fact that there's that second fight looming and they want to make sure there's a bit of entertainment. You know, if one of them wins on points, there's going to be a lot of people, regardless of the way the fight goes, that says, they were robbed. I think the other person won. What a terrible decision. And look, there's a lot of bad judges' decisions in boxing. There are always people that are going to say they thought the other person won. Most of the time, the person that gets the victory on points did deserve the victory. But a lot of people don't understand the way point scoring works in boxing. It's not about the person who looks like they're going to get the knockout the most. KSI's style, in my opinion, is more likely to pick up round victories because he just uses that jab. He's going to land a lot of punches, I think, with his timing. Whereas Logan, I think, is going to be sort of throwing a few too many punches and perhaps not landing as many as he should. However, if Logan does land one of those big punches, it could be lights out for KSI. Ultimately, I do hope that it's boxing that is the #1 priority on their minds. I hope that they're both going out there and not just saying they want to knock them out and not just believing that they want to knock them out, but proving that they want to knock them out. If one of them can go out there and knock the other person out, they're going to go down in history. You know, it's bad to say, they're both going to know that that second fight needs to happen for them to make a lot of money. Will it have an impact on the fight? I guess time will tell. And yes, that is a pretty crazy thing to say. I've not seen anyone else talking about the second fight factor on this first one, but it could have a bearing. I'm not saying it definitely will, but it's definitely a factor that's worth considering. So just to make it clear, if I get the right price, I would be putting my money on KSI to win on points. Let's move on to talking about Jake Paul against Deji now. Jake Paul knocks Deji out. I have no doubt in my mind. That's it. If you have enjoyed this video, then make sure you hit that like button, and I'd love to hear your predictions on the fight itself. Do they differ to mine? Do you agree with the points I've made? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you, whether you agree with me, disagree with me, whatever. If you do want to hear more from me and see more of my betting predictions and betting related content, make sure you hit that subscribe button with notifications turned on, and I hope I can see you again in another video. Until next time, I hope you have a great day.